Fala pessoal do SharpCast, tudo bom com vocês? Eu aqui novamente passando antes desse episódio para deixar 2 recadinhos para vocês. Primeiro de tudo, falar da nossa parceira BETBRA, que está nos ajudando aqui a trazer esse episódio. Vocês já podem ver aqui, né? Temos aqui o nosso QR Code aqui. Mas só para falar um pouquinho dela antes, a BETBRA é uma parceira que a gente já usa aqui nas nossas operações diariamente. E ela funciona como um espelho da Pinnacle e também funciona como um espelho da Betfair. Ou seja, ela é uma sportsbook e uma exchange em uma única casa. E com isso, você vai ter várias opções de odds, várias opções de ligas e lugares para você apostar. E a gente recomenda muito porque eles têm uma das melhores odds do mercado, com certeza. Além de funcionalidades diversas que ainda auxiliam a vida do apostador, como planejamento automático de entradas e coisas nesse sentido. Então, se vocês gostam da ideia, o link está aqui no na nossa descrição e também tem o QR Code em algum lugar aqui da tela. É só vocês clicarem lá ou escanearem que vocês vão ser direcionados direto para lá, beleza? E outro recadinho é sobre o nosso outro parceiro, a BetDex, que é uma exchange, ela é bem recente no mercado, mas eles são dos mesmos criadores, dos mesmos fundadores da FanDuel, que é uma das maiores casas aí do mundo. E eles têm uma pegada tecnológica bem diferente, que eles funcionam com padrões de blockchain. Então, é uma novidade bem legal. E com isso eles conseguem trazer muita segurança, conseguem trazer odds excelentes para o mercado. Eu tenho certeza que vocês vão gostar de conferir. O link está aqui na nossa descrição, é só vocês irem lá, fechou? Então bora para mais um episódio.
Boa tarde, pessoal. Obrigado por estarem aqui mais uma vez. Eu hoje estou nervoso pela primeira vez. Eu sinto muito honrado em ter connosco uma pessoa que para mim é muito especial e talvez das pessoas com quem eu mais aprendi ao longo destes últimos anos. É um senhor norte-americano, o Sr. Richard Munchkin, é uma pessoa que esteve 15 anos à frente de um podcast sobre jogo, sobre casinos, advantage play, e basicamente foi uma das pessoas com quem eu mais aprendi em toda a minha vida. E sem mais, vou passar a palavra. Hello, Richard. Thank you very much. I'm really sure most of people are. You don't need introductions, but still, I'm going to ask you if you please give us a short review of your experience and how you get here.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my name is Richard Munchkin. I have been a games player all my life. Started out playing chess when I was 3 and gin rummy with my grandmother, and became fascinated with gambling in high school when my brother, my older brother, invited some friends over to play poker, and they asked if I wanted to play. And we were playing for tiny, tiny stakes. And I remember I won about $5, and it was like the heavens opened and the angels began to sing, because I thought, oh my God, I can actually make money gambling. And that was my start. I went from there to backgammon and made my way through college playing backgammon and poker. And then after college, I moved to Las Vegas and began counting cards and blackjack, and learned pretty quickly that there were bigger advantages to be had in casino games, and the casinos really didn't understand them. So once you moved past counting cards, the heat from the casinos got less and the advantage got bigger. And then, so for the last 45 years, I've been traveling around the world gambling, and just recently moved into, I had retired. I had formally retired, and then my longtime partner sort of dragged me back in, and now I've gotten involved in the last 6 months in sports betting.
Okay. You have given me a lot of things to ask you about. There is something I'm not sure you didn't mention, but I think it's very important, because me as a chess player, we have a sentence from a former world champion that says, we are in chess like we are in life. And you are a gambler. You were a gambler all your life. You will be a gambler until biology deals with it. But probably you didn't mention the movies and all those passions that you have. you are also a person with a seventh thought in you, and your passion for the movie or for the cinema, it started directing. I think you directed several movies already, but where did these two cross?
So yeah, I started acting when I was 13 years old, and thought that was what I wanted to do with my life, was be an actor. But I never had the illusion that I would be able to make a living at it. So after I went to Las Vegas and I made a bunch of money playing blackjack, I moved to Los Angeles to get into the film business, originally to be an actor. And my background was in theater, and I found very quickly that acting in film and television was not like my experience in theater, and realized this is not what I want to do with my life. You know, it was pretty awful the way they treated actors in Los Angeles. And fortunately, I was able to transition from in front of the camera to behind the camera. And I started directing and producing and writing. But to me, the arts is always is a habit that you have to learn how to afford. Again, I was not going to make my living that way. I mean, I would if I could, but I always had gambling to actually make my living.
But is gambling a form of art? Do you consider gambling an art?
It can be. Absolutely, it can be. Because in any form of gambling, there are two parts of it. The first is you have to find out how to have an advantage, a mathematical advantage. And the second part is you have to figure out how to actually win the money. You know, if you are whatever the game is, if you're betting against the house, whether it's a casino or a sports book, if you start winning, they're going to throw you out and tell you can't bet anymore, or they're going to limit you to tiny stakes. At least that's the way it is here in the US. And actually, I've played in casinos around the world and been thrown out of casinos around the world. So the art for me is in learning how to actually extract the maximum amount of money out of a particular casino or sports book.
Okay. I'm going to start to ask you 2 or 3 questions, because I have listened as I told you prior, I have listened to all your episodes, and I have listened to several of them more than once, and some of them I listened actually 3 or 4 times. You started as a chess player, but then your first experience, and you correct me if I'm wrong, your first experiences were in the Blackgammon, which is a game. Of course, there are some strategies in the game, but for sure there are some dice, and dice gives you some kind of randomness in the game. Do you consider for the Blackgammon a game of chance or a game of strategy, or it's in the middle? How do you compare it to chess, or let's say Texas Hold'em, for instance?
Okay, so the problem with chess is that it's a terrible game for gambling, because you know who's going to win before you start. I mean, unless the guy is hustling you and you don't know who he is or what his rating is or whatever.
Yeah.
Backgammon is a tremendous gambling game because it is a game of skill, but like poker, there is enough luck involved that the bad player just thinks he got unlucky. And in the long run, the good player is going to win. So it's a tremendous game for gambling. Definitely, it is a game of skill.
Okay. And art, because you need to fake. Maybe if you are a strong player, sometimes you need to lose or to fake, or don't show as sharp. So
I never did that. I didn't do that. What I found was that there was, first of all, when you're head-to-head gambling, there are often guys who are just assholes. they are really unpleasant to play against. And I was always very pleasant to play against. People liked playing with me. And there was something about my personality. For some reason, they just never thought I was very good. And it didn't matter if I beat them or how often I won. They just didn't give me credit for it, and they enjoyed playing with me. And, you know, I wrote a book called Gambling Wizards, where I interviewed a lot of the top professional gamblers. And one of them is one of the top backgammon players in the world, a guy named Mike Svobodny. And basically he said that he got to play with people that nobody got to play with. Good players would salivate over people that Mike got to play with. And for some reason, he could get them to play and other sharp players could not. And he said, you know, that he was pleasant to play with. He was always going to show them a good time. And also, you know, sometimes he would take the worst of it. Not lose intentionally, but just offer a proposition where he didn't have the best of it. And you don't have to play it forever. You know, you can stop once maybe you start losing at it, but he would show those players also that he had some gamble in him. So that, you know, that's
interesting, because I have listened to many. One of the names that is most frequently talked when you are starting to talk advantage play is Ed Thorpe, and the book that he has written in 1962, I think.
2 or 3.
And yeah, this changed the old concept of card counting and blackjack, and most of the guys that enter the advantage play, they do it through blackjack, card counting, and all those derivatives that they can do. When you went from your backgammon to the card counting or to the blackjack AP, let's talk it like that, because card counting is not very pleasant. You had previous knowledge of Thorpe's writing. You have your own crew, you have your own team. I was transiting from a game with, well, some randomness, but in information, that's just, everything is over there in the table, and to a game that the information is hidden. Was this process complex? Can you explain how you changed?
So the thing about backgammon or poker is, and at that time, you really didn't know if you had an edge until, you know, empirically, after you've played 1,000 hours or something and you're ahead, you can say, okay, I had an edge. In blackjack, you can know exactly what your edge is. So that part of it was great. There's a right play and a wrong play for every situation in blackjack. The bad part of it, though, was your edge was so tiny that your fluctuations, I mean, when I started playing blackjack as a card counter, I lost for 167 hours of play. And I kept thinking I must be doing it wrong. You know, I know what on the kitchen table, you can look at me and I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. And I would have friends come with me and sit with me in the casino and watch what I did and count with me. And I would lose. And they would say, no, you're doing everything right. It's just a bad streak. It was good to go through that at the beginning, because it made me realize I need a bigger edge. I need to find a bigger edge so that these fluctuations are not going to be so extreme.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think the world now is more definitive. Everybody who speaks about some subject, everybody tends to speak like, I know this is it. But you are explaining to us about randomness in the effect that randomness, and sometimes things are not black or white. They are some kind of
Yeah. Well, and now getting into sports betting, I'm experiencing these fluctuations again, mainly because when you play blackjack, you may have 100 decisions an hour. But in sports betting, maybe you only get to make 10 bets in a day. So it takes a long time for you to get thousands of bets to actually see, because you don't know for sure what your edge is. And maybe your edge is different in basketball than it is in football.
Sure.
And,
I think I have an idea, my concept, and let's talk a little bit of sports betting. My concept is that we tend to focus a lot on the edge, on the EV, but if you have an equation and you have the EV, that's your holy grail, but then you need to take the margin of the bookies, and nowadays everybody is talking about margin. The bookies tend to have big choice, the variance, and if you subtract that to your edge, things tend to be more complex. Because my idea, and I have developed many systems because of what I see older guys doing in other types of betting, not sports betting, but for instance, the races. I think the execution nowadays is of the utmost importance, because if you are trying to stake big, the bookie will not allow it, because the limits tend to be smaller than they were before. So like maybe for sure 20 years ago, when Roxy and all the others were still there, the limits were much bigger than what they are now. And nowadays, if you put 10 dimes in a bet, you need to be careful, because probably you can be expelled of that bookie or that casino if that bet actually wins. So execution.
Absolutely. I mean, here in Las Vegas, first of all, they would never take 10 dimes. I mean, circa maybe, but most of the recreational bookmakers, they won't take 10,000 on a game. Absolutely. And you could bet, 500 on games, and you win a few bets and you get limited, and suddenly you're only allowed to bet $3 or something. It's terrible here in the United States.
I think execution now is important. Execution. How do you execute? How do you put the money inside the market? That's top. And now the secrets for me, the guys who are most efficient nowadays are not the guys who tend to have the biggest edges, because the biggest edges is where you cannot put money down, but are the guys that tend to create ecosystems where they can execute better those bets, if I say so. Because this is my idea of this. Probably other sharp minds could differ, but this is my opinion.
I agree with you 100%, and that is the art in the sports betting that we were talking about. Yeah, and the other thing is, if you let's say your overall ROI, your return on investment, is 10%. Well, I think you're doing something wrong, because why aren't you betting the bets that are 9% and 8 and 7 and 6 and 5 and getting more volume? You know what I mean? And as you say, the biggest edges are the things that are going to get you cut off the fastest.
I lost a whale account some 2 weeks ago. I had a whale account. The whale had like, I don't know, 30, 40K losses on it, It was a perfect account to make money with. And I have a friend, and this guy is a trader for a syndicate, and they trade they trade cricket, live cricket. They have they have immense volume. And the guy said, "Look, I know a guy is destroying badminton." And I said, "What the fuck, badminton? Yeah, is destroying. Look at this." And he sent me a spreadsheet, and I see like 15 European odds, 15 at 15, 15 times it pays 15 times one, 15 times one, 15 times one. Oh my God, this guy is really destroying this, because the opening numbers were very weak. The market was not very liquid. But I said, what the hell? I have to try this, because this is a whale account. There's no way the bookie, the trading department, is going to destroy an account that has given them as much money as this account did. So, okay, let's try this. And I made a treble with 15 and 15 and something at evens, I believe. And I won. But I put just like 100 or $50 on it. And I lost the account.
Wow.
I lost the account.
That's just crazy.
I said, how is it possible to lose an account? If I go to the market and I try to sell that account should have at least for 10 times I would not sell that account. And I lost the account with a, excuse my word, a stupid bet on badminton. I will share it. I will share the bets with you off air, but I lost the account. And I said, I am an experienced guy. I just never thought it would be possible to lose an account with minus, I don't know, it was an old account, more than 10 years. It was everything perfect, and I lost it with one bet in badminton.
Wow. But that's crazy. I mean, that has to be a bad bookmaker, right? You have an account for 10 years, losing all that money, and a guy wins a lucky $50 bet. I mean, that's if I was on the trading room of that bookmaker, on the risk department, I would slap the guy who closed the account, because it doesn't make sense. I didn't make any shift in my behavior. I didn't started to become sharp. I was just slowly extracting, but it is what it is. But you know, you see this also in the casinos, where because the people running these places now don't really come from a gambling background, so they don't really understand. And so casinos will bar people who win money playing craps, playing roulette. You know, if they just win, playing slot machines, if they just win too much money, they're like, we don't want that player, because they're owned by corporations, and nobody ever got fired for telling a player not to play anymore. Yeah,
but they should. They should
is right.
No, but the problem now is I make mistakes. I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And I have 15 years experience in the syndicate level, and I made a mistake because I had an assumption that that account was solid enough for not being limited. I made a very small bet, and I was limited. I lost an account. I lost a lot of money losing that account. But everybody makes mistakes. So if I ask you, from your experience in your life, in your 45 years advantage play, can you share a bad beat with us?
A bad beat or a big mistake?
Or a big mistake?
A
mistake that advantage players, even if they are experienced, they take.
I can tell you about a mistake. The first one that comes to mind, it wasn't my mistake, but it's an example of just a ridiculously bad mistake that cost me a lot. And that was I was in very good at a casino. They loved me. I had created in their mind, on their books, I was a huge losing player. This is part of the art we talk about of advantage play. So in their mind, I had lost 6 figures in that casino, even though I was actually ahead. And I was there on a big, busy weekend, and another advantage player who knew me well, I had come down, it was Sunday morning, and I was going to breakfast with my wife and my children, and I see him, he sees me, and he gives me a signal that means follow me. So I tell my wife, I'll meet you in the restaurant, and I follow him over to an area where the phones are. And he says to me, oh my God, I can't believe I have so much heat. There's a detective agency that looks for advantage players and cheats in Las Vegas. They're called the Griffin Agency. He said, there's Griffin agents here watching me. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing talking to me when you know that they are watching you? And I left. And sure enough, later I was locked out of my room. Here comes 6 security guards and a shift manager to 86 us from the property and escort us out. And it was just something so stupid. And I was like, how could he have done that?
I listened to that story. It's very funny because I've listened more than once for you guys saying that you were at the tables and you don't even speak to each other. You're just like, you can be 2 or 3 APs, but the code, it's like a moral code not to interact with each other. It's like, so
yeah, you don't know if they have heat or if you put heat on them, or so you see somebody in a casino, you don't go near them, you don't speak, you don't.
Okay, not mentioning places. Have you ever been in Portugal, Spain, Europe, Brazil, these places?
I have been to Europe, but unfortunately I've never been to Portugal or Spain or Brazil. Does Brazil have casinos?
There are casinos everywhere. Yeah, the legislation now is shifting, and Brazil will be one of the biggest gambling hubs in the world in the next 5 to 20 years, because
Wow.
Brazil. Yeah, I know several people in Macau, because Macau, that for sure you have been there in your life as an advantage player. Macau is very big in casinos business. It was bigger. It's now getting the politics is shifting in China, and now Macau is losing its power. But I know many lawyers there. Their specialty is gambling law, and they are preparing documents for Brazil to open and to be a very strong hub for casinos. The legislation now is shifting in Brazil. They are going to be fully regulated on gambling. The law has been approved. I can share with you, but in the next 4 to 5 years, if you have good weather and good hotels, and now you have a good gambling law, for sure casinos will appear. And I say this because I know people that are preparing the packages and submitting their degrees and their documentation, so they can be lawyers for those casinos in Brazilian according to their legislation. So it will be a very interesting hub for advantage play in the next years.
As far as Europe, I played in UK, France, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, Poland.
You are invited. You are invited to come to Portugal or Spain, and I will show you some casinos. And
Yeah,
and
actually,
you allow me to learn a little bit of your experience, and you teach me how to be an advantage player. I have a question that I like to make to everybody that I'm interviewing here, because I tend to learn a lot from everybody. And a friend of us last episodes gave me a lesson. It teaches me. He gave me an answer I was not expecting, and I'm going to ask you the same question to see what's your approach on this. It's very People tend to go to gambling. I see many guys, young guys. They come, they know some technique, they are strong, they can work, they can grind for 20 hours a day because they are in their 20s. But I see that all the people that have succeeded in AP, in gambling, in all kinds of forms, they have a toolkit. So they have a toolkit, and they bring to the game, they bring to the table their toolkit. You are a very likable person, for sure. To be likable has helped you in many situations, because people tend to lower their defenses and tend not to be so sharp at the table if you are likable. I'm pretty sure this is one of your tools. You have learned this from your life experience, but of course you have learned this also from your family background, your fathers, your grandfathers. What was the most important thing that happened in your childhood that you see now after 45 years of advantage play that helped you? But I'm not just saying, look, I learned how to count cards. No, I'm just saying things outside that you bring into the game. Can you share one of those things with us?
yeah. So the most important one, it's funny, I was not expecting this question.
But do you like the question?
I like the question a lot, but it's an emotional thing for me. So I grew up as a fat kid. In school, I was the fat kid from the time I was 6 years old. And as anybody who's been fat could tell you, you go through a lot of teasing and humiliation and being picked on and things like that. And I think that continues. I lost weight when I moved to Las Vegas when I was in my early 20s. And I've been at a pretty normal weight since then. But I think I have carried that with me my entire life. And I think that one of the ways that it affected me was it made me more empathetic to other people. So when you say I'm a nice guy, I think that may be the biggest contributing factor.
It's very honest, and I thank you for that answer.
And you know what? And I have to tell you one thing. A couple of years ago, I needed a suit, and I went to be fitted for the suit. And the salesman said, okay, you're a 38 slim. And without a hesitation, without thinking at all, I said, I've never been a slim anything in my life. And I thought, it's been 40 fucking years since I lost weight, and I'm still, in my head, I'm still a fat person. So
yeah, that's unbelievable. That gives you that's you know what Spanky said to me. He destroyed me because he's very humble, and he said to me, work ethics. I work more than everybody. My team works more than everybody. Work ethics. And I think nowadays, if we are creating a content to give to the people outside, and they want to be, because we know that thousands, in 1,000 guys, 3 of them are going to succeed at the level to probably have a life on gambling. One of them might excel. One of them might excel, but this is so hard. And we are a mix of emotions, and our characteristics that we bring to the table tend to be characteristics that we have forged many years ago, and that sometimes we don't even remember. And I think those are important for people to understand, that they have to be, it's like there is a saying, they have to make their weakness their strength. They have to to make it. I have a question about gambling again, and because I'm derivating from one to the other. Do you think casinos are beatable in 2024?
Oh
You
God,
said
yes.
once.
Oh,
You said
yes.
once. Yes.
Oh, but there's more money to be made now than ever. Even though you can't bet anywhere near as much, but they keep inventing new games, and they often make mistakes when they invent these new games. And so now, you know, if I were going to go back into casinos and play, the last game I would ever play is blackjack. I mean, or I would never count cards anymore. I mean, and when my son was growing up, I forbade him to count cards. It was like, you know, there's such value in having a clean name. So, I mean, because there are so many casinos everywhere. Oh yes, it's a great time to be an advantage player in casinos.
I was not expecting that answer, Mr. Munchkin. I was expecting exactly the opposite. Because in sports betting, everybody says, no, the old days were better because we had higher limits and the bookies tend to be soft. And now you are saying to me that casinos are soft than ever. And
I mean, here are the problems, okay? And this applies to sports betting as well. 40 years ago, I could go into a casino, win $50,000, go up to the cashier's cage, cash it out. They would hand me a stack of cash, and no one would ever dream of asking me what my name is. Now, you know, you have to give your ID and where you got the money and all this kind of stuff. So the loss of anonymity is a problem. And the communication from one casino to the next is a problem. But if you're sharp and you know how to you can last a very long time and have the casinos never suspect you of anything if you really know what you're doing. And there are now so many casinos that you can just be on the road and, you know, play forever.
Okay, but you said now if you started, if you were back in the 20s and you started, you were not going to count cards. So where would you start? Which games? Roulette or?
No. So part of it depends on how much bankroll you have, where you start. But the easiest way to start now is slot machines. There are many slot machines that are beatable because they have a varied state. You play and something builds up like a progressive meter or something, and you can calculate when those slot machines are in a positive state. And the edges are very high. And, you know, so, and they're everywhere. And so a lot of people who were sort of struggling card counters moved over into slot machines and are doing very well. I mean, easily you can make 6 figures a year in slots if you know what you're doing. very easily.
Do you lecture? Everybody's going to send you an email after this.
Yeah. Don't ask me to tell you which slots and what the numbers are, and
No,
but
I
it's
don't.
out
I
there.
don't.
Like
But
you said, if it's how hard you work. People want to just be handed everything on a silver platter, and the secret to success, there are two things: how hard you work and your network.
Yeah.
I cannot emphasize enough how important your network is. And, there are guys who come from a position of scarcity. They think that there is a limited number of anything, and they will not tell anybody anything because it might cost them something. And I am the opposite. I come from a position of abundance. There is plenty out there. There is plenty to go around. And if you share things with people, they're going to share things back with you, and you're both going to make more money. And, so it's, yeah.
It's something that I'm not going to ask you more about that, because first I want to preserve your edges, everything, but it's understandable. You have given us a path. You are in the Blackjack Hall of Fame since 2009, I believe. You were one of the graciated to being in the Blackjack Hall of Fame. You are in the movies. You are, for me, one of your most, I'm not sure if you know this, but I'm going to tell you, one of your most biggest achievements is a podcast that lasted for 10, 15 years.
13 years. 13.
13
And
years.
and still going occasionally. We still release an episode now and then.
Yeah. So your new project is to share with the audience, people, and the people to speak about the gambles in life. I would like in this podcast to speak a little bit about your podcast, because I enjoy it very much, and I would like you to tell us, was that something you need to give back to the communities?
I think so. I mean, initially, I didn't think about it that way. Originally, my partner Bob Dancer started the podcast. He had a different host for the first 6 months, and it was
Yeah.
not working out. And so he asked me, and initially, I just thought, oh, this sounds like fun, and I like talking to people and hearing their stories, and then as it sort of progressed, I would get feedback from people. A number of them would give me feedback and say, you changed my life, like you literally changed my life. And I was like, oh my God, like there's not much better than that for me. I mean, like, to know that you had a positive impact on somebody like that was tremendously rewarding, and still is.
You did change my life. I told you before, and telling you again. I learned a lot listening to you and Bob Dancer. Names that were with you explaining things make me think about my process. I improved my process a lot by listening to you, to Bob Dancer, to your guests, and I think you changed a lot of people's lives, and that should make you a very rich person, because we are a little bit of what you produced for us. But you are still young, and you are still grinding. And what are your newest projects?
Well, as I mentioned, I just got into sports betting about 6 months ago. So that and the new podcast, which I still like doing, Gambling with an Edge. It just became too much of a grind to try to do it every single week and for an hour. And I really wanted to be able to talk to people who weren't gamblers, which, you know, Gambling with an Edge was not really set up for that. So that's why I started the second podcast. And I've kind of taken some time off. I haven't released an episode, I think, in a month, but I have a couple episodes that I'm going to be recording within the next couple of weeks. So things will be coming again. So those are really the two things that are occupying my time.
I learned several things listening, and not sure, because sometimes I'm not in the US. I don't know everything that's happening in the US, but there is someone I would like to listen. So if you consider guest lists, and if you allow me to ask you, Mr. Bob Bright.
Bob Bright?
Bob Bright.
Okay, I don't know who that is. So fill me in.
It was. Let me show you. It was. We can edit this part afterwards. It was. Let me see. How do you spell Bob Bright? Yes, he has an episode with Chat with Traders that is called The Pursuit of Edge, episode 203. Bob Bright. He was counting cards in Las Vegas and at the blackjack tables, and he then created a company with leverage ETFs. He created Bright Trading in 1992, and I think
is it BRITE or GHT?
BRIGHT. And I'm saying this because in this episode, this speaks something that I think is of the utmost importance, is that it's important for you to know all the actors in the ecosystems. So when you are an advantage player, you need to know who represents danger for you in the casino. You need to know the games, the people that are dealing cards. You need to know who the other APs and who other guys that are going to lose the money, and to allow you to fade away with your winnings and be gone with you. So you need to know the actors of the ecosystems. When you started this journey, you have for sure learned with others, with the groups that we work with. Could you share a story of how the networking that you had and you created with those people or groups were important for you to succeed? Something you have total freedom to share a story with us.
Sure. Remind me, I don't want to forget this, because when you asked about what I'm doing now, you're going to edit, so you can put this in. I just want to do it so I don't forget.
Okay.
There is one other thing that I'm very involved in, and that is it's called personal narrative storytelling. And there's an organization around the world called The Moth. And they have these events where, and the website is themoth.org. And they have these events, usually in a bar or restaurant. And people get up from the audience and tell true stories about their life. And they have a podcast, a moth, MOTH, like the bug.
Ah, okay.
and they have a podcast. And I started listening to this podcast 15 years ago, and I was blown away by the stories. I mean, it's part of why I wanted to do the Life is a Gamble podcast, because I would hear these true stories from people and just be blown away by some of the things that they would say or happen. And so I got very involved in that. So I go to these storytelling shows. Often you throw your name in a hat and they just pull names, and these stories are short, no longer than 6 minutes. And you get up in front of people, no notes, no written, and it has to be true, and it has to be a story about you. And anyway, so that's the other thing I'm very involved with. Okay.
No, yeah, this is plus EV for me. I like these things.
You should look. I would guess that they probably have events in Spain, maybe Portugal. I know they do in London and some other European cities.
I go to London often. I'm going to see if I can attend one of these. Just curious.
And if you do, please tell me what you think of it, because I think you'll be blown away.
I will.
Okay.
I will.
Now back to an example of networking, and its power. So I met an Australian card counter when I was first starting out, and he actually bankrolled me and some friends in a little team. His name is Alan Woods. He became one of the most successful gamblers in the world, betting horse racing in Hong Kong. But anyway, in 1986, and I should just add, my book, Gambling Wizards, there is an interview with Alan in that book. There are some amazing stories in there about one of them about his booking soccer, which I could tell you about that too. But okay, so we met like 1980 or 81. He went off to Hong Kong to bet horses. 1986, he calls me up and he says, hey, I have this blackjack game that's really good, and why don't you go play it, and I'll put up the money and we'll split the winnings. And I said, well, I have a team that I can't just leave the team, and I can't just do that, And he said, well, how about this? How about the whole team goes and plays, and whatever you guys are going to bet, I'll match whatever you bet and take half of the bankroll. And I said, okay, great.
50% free roll. Yeah.
Well, no. Oh, no. Not quite, because the way it usually works is the investors get half the win and the players get half the win. And he's only putting up half of the bankroll. So he's getting 25%. But anyway.
Okay, but 25 is not bad.
Still, yeah. Well, especially because the game had an advantage off the top. With no counting cards, you had an advantage because the rules were so good. And it was in Seoul, Korea. And so we went over and started playing in Seoul at this casino, Walker Hill. And at the time, Japan was in their boom period. And all of the customers in this casino were Japanese coming over to gamble because there was no casino in Japan.
Yeah.
And most casinos that you walk into, the average player would buy in for like $100 or 100 euros. That casino, the average player would buy in for 1,000. And when a casino is making a lot of money, it's an opportunity for you to make a lot of money because they can afford to lose. So we started playing. We realized we stuck out kind of like a sore thumb because we were Caucasians and everybody else there was Japanese. So we thought, all right, we're going to get Japanese whales to bet for us. We will sit at the table and signal to them exactly how much to bet and how to play every hand. And we ended up winning over $1 million in that one casino based on a phone call from Alan Woods. So let me tell you one more Alan Woods story while I'm on it, right?
Okay.
So Alan calls me. I forget what year this was. It was in the 90s sometime. And he calls me up and he says, hey, you know, I ended up like the bookies here, they're getting too much World Cup action and they wanted to lay off. So they're laying off to me. And he goes, do you want, you know, a piece of the action? And so basically he's the bookie, right? He's charging juice. So I know he has an edge. And I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. And he says, well, I was thinking half of 1%. And I was like, okay. And then I thought like, well, gee, I mean, it's nice that you're just giving me this, but half of 1%, like, okay, what's that going to be? $27 or something? So when it got time to the finals, he calls me up and he says, look, I was thinking that maybe you might want to take your percentage down to 0.1% on the finals. And I was like, Alan, how much can I swing with half of 1%? He said, 125,000. And I said, yeah, take me down to a 10th.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But again, you know, I think I ended up, you know, winning 40 or 50,000 with my tiny little piece. And again, just because he called me up out of the blue and asked me if I wanted, you know, this opportunity. So,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, there are just never ending stories of where networks have provided money like that.
Yeah, those two examples are insane because first of all, it has to do probably with you because people like you and people tend to give opportunities to people who they like. That's one. Second is the numbers you are talking about. They you know, the first thing that came into my mind when you were talking about those percentages and then you correlated that with the number, I said, what's the turnover on this? What's the real turnover that this guy had? What's the action that he had on this is what's the number? I was trying to calculate the turnover and it's big. So,
yeah. By the way, I have to tell you one other thing about Korea. After we had won, I forget, 300, 400, 500,000, something like that, Alan said, hey, look, you don't have to let me invest anymore. You know, I've never made this much money doing nothing, you know, and I was like, Alan, but you gave us the game. I mean, we're happy to allow you to keep investing. And he was like, no, I feel bad. I made enough. You guys just go ahead. I was like, well, okay, yeah.
Mr. Alan Woods.
And it was a shame. He died, you know, back 10, 15 years ago or whatever. He was a good friend.
I would keep you here for 7 hours, but I'm not really sure. I'm going to allow you to help us to be better. And if you are in your 20s and you want to give an advice to a younger self version of you to start now a career in advantage play, sports betting, could you do it in 2 or 3 minutes?
Yeah, well, I think basically I've already done it. The most important thing is how hard you work and your network. And the network is just, it's tremendously important. And if you're trying to build a bankroll, I mean, I think the easiest way right now, well, there are two things that are pretty easy for building a bankroll. One is learning how to play slots. The other is taking advantage of bonuses at sports books. So you can start with very little money and build a bankroll that way. that's what I do. And just to give you a little more of a hint, you know, when I wanted to learn something, whether it was poker or backgammon or blackjack, whatever it was, the first thing I would do is go read every book I could find on the subject. And nowadays with the internet, I mean, you can't consume it all. You know, there's just too much to consume. But so the first is I would educate myself as much as possible with the books. And there are forums now and places where you can ask people questions. Which book should I read and which one should I avoid? And those things are out there. So, and the other thing is Twitter, gambling Twitter. You know, you have to be kind of smart and discerning about what you pay attention to. But there is tremendous information out there on Twitter, especially in the slot machine area. So people are going to ask me, like, how do I learn to play slots? Start investigating Twitter, and you know, you can find your way.
Okay, but off air, you are going to tip me a good book to read on slots, because I like
There is
to
no
read.
book. There is no book. Well, there is a, yeah, there. Okay, I'll give you one book. It's not great.
I have, look, I have two problems. I am a podcast addict, and I read everything that there is to read for good literature. So there for sure there is a book. I asked Spanky if he bought all the copies of that tiny book he's always talking about, to the secrets of sports betting, and he probably did. He bought them all. No one can get that book nowadays. But you have a friend, I think you interviewed him, Ed Miller.
Yep. Both his books are excellent.
Those books are great. Those
Yep.
books. I'm saying this because that's good publicity. Because if people are in Brazil, they can seek Ed Miller and buy those books. Those books are the best books I have ever read, because they are very actual. They are very good.
Yep.
But there are all kinds of books, from Taleb to Thinking Fast, Fast and Slow.
Yeah.
There are lots of things that can be. Richard Munchkin, it was a pleasure to meet you. It was a pleasure to. It's one of the things I just need to plant a tree, because I'm going to ask the three persons I want to interview in the podcast. And I hope you enjoyed this, and we will see each other again. E foi assim, pessoal, que nós acabámos uma entrevista curta com uma pessoa que eu admiro imenso, é uma pessoa com quem eu aprendi muito, e falámos aqui de várias coisas que eu acho que vocês devem pensar, e que devem procurar o conhecimento. E para já é só. Até ao próximo SharpCast. Um grande abraço a todos e obrigado por estarem aí. E última coisa, chamem amigos para o canal, cliquem nos sininhos, favoritem-nos, porque nós queremos continuar a ter motivação para trazer convidados deste nível para o pé de vocês. Um grande abraço e bem-ajam.